Hi, this is Christina Adams. This is the place where we talk about God, Christianity, and life. Right now, I have here Athanasius's On the Incarnation, and so I was going to talk about that for a little bit. Just a really quick, brief review, not very academic or detailed, but just a layman's view of it of sorts. So, I I'd never even heard of Athanasius for most of my life, and then I had someone mention him, and it was just sort of like this name that existed out there. And then I had to take a class in which we had to read him, and that was actually last year around this time. And I was like, oh, good. Well, now I finally get to hear what this guy says. Dating, because you never know what you're going to get into, and what you're going to. How what the language is going to be, or if it's going to be easy to understand or harder to understand. But I found this book to be fairly easy in its language. It's, as you can see, it's really not that thick. I think it only has about 80 some, 88 pages. And so it's not that long. And this particular version has really huge print. So it's not like a lot of tiny, really small stuff either. So that I really appreciated that. But the general premise, well, first off, I guess if you have never heard of Athanasius like I hadn't. Some things to know: he was alive in the 300s, and he was a part of the Council of Nicaea, the yeah, and in which he argued for the incarnation with Christ, and that he was the whole argument between homoousios, if you're familiar with the Greek, or if not, it's like the difference between being with the Father or of the Father, I think is correct. But you can let me know in the comments if it's not. And yeah, it was an argument over one Greek word, the Council of Nicaea, and what Jesus was, because the idea behind it was if Jesus was God or if Jesus came from God. And Athanasius makes a pretty good argument that Jesus was God. And that's one of the interesting things about it, is that he does talk about how uh, one of the things that I liked about him was that he describes Jesus as possessing a body and yet at the same time controlling all of creation. It's just a really interesting thing. The interesting thing about Christianity now is that we don't think as much about, and what does it mean that Jesus was God? What does it mean that he was God and man? And what's the difference? What's the boundaries, or if there are any boundaries? And Athanasius kind of goes in the Jesus was all God to the point where his body was just there for our sake. Well, maybe not quite that far, but it was just like, he ate and he drank, and he, every time it mentions him being tired, it tells us that because his body was real. And but yet at the same time, Jesus was, he the word, actually, Athanasius uses the word logos, or the as a descriptor of Jesus and his uh, just his presence with in everywhere. And yeah, so I really like that, just because it made me think. And then I was reading John earlier today, and how Jesus, he knew what was, he didn't need to be told what was in a man, because he knew what was in human nature. And it was just like this, oh wow, like that's really neat to think about. Yeah, Jesus didn't have to be taught. Is it that he didn't have to be taught because he just intuitively knew what people were thinking, or did he actually really know at the same time? As, I don't know, just interesting to think about. So one of the other things that I really liked about uh, Athanasius is this one section in on page 42, where Athanasius describes Jesus as a generous and as a generous wrestler that is virile and strong. And it's just really a very interesting comparison, especially because in that section, Athanasius is talking about how Jesus was when he was facing his death, and how he's basically standing before the Pharisees, or the Sanhedrin, and he is the strongest and the most. It says that he does not himself choose his antagonists, lest it should be thought that of some of them he is afraid. Rather, he lets the spectators choose, and that all the more if these are hostile, so that he may overthrow whomsoever they match against him, and thus vindicate his superior strength. Even so it was with Christ. I just love that. It's like this modern day, or I guess back in those days it was the gladiators, but this modern day UFC match, and the guy's like, yeah, go ahead and put whoever you want in there with me. I'll take them. And I just thought that was a really cool image. And too, because one of Athanasius's points is that Jesus took whatever death that they were going to give him precisely so that he could show that he was Lord over death, and that he could destroy it, and that it was completely destroyed. And then Athanasius, he goes and he talks about how is it possible that people who are Christians, they don't care about death, they're willing to go to it, and even women aren't they don't faint, or they're not afraid, and they're totally capable of just disdaining death, because Jesus is the champion over it. So that's just I just think it's really neat, the depiction of Christ as the champion over death. So if you've ever read Athanasius, what were your thoughts? And if you haven't, I would strongly suggest that you go ahead and check it out. One of the other cool things about this book is that the very beginning of it has a preface or introduction from C.S. Lewis, which was a pleasant surprise. And C.S. Lewis, he talks about how so many people tend to read what modern people think of classics rather than going to the classics themselves. And but at the same time, that's where a lot of the things that we believe come from. They come from the arguments that were made back in those days, and the things that they said and that they wrote. And for this particular version, translation, and this topic, it actually was fairly okay to read. But yeah, so I hope you get a chance to read it. And if you have already read it, let me know what you think of it.